She took his death in great despite, and she took his death in great despite, and as her rage did move, determined for to wreak her wrath upon her husband's love, forthwith she cast before her eyes right strange and ugly sights, compelling her to think she saw some fiends or wicked sprites. And in her heart such secret pricks and piercing stings she gave her, as through the world from place to place with restless sorrow drave her. Thou, Nihilus, wert assigned to stay her pains and travels past, to which, as soon as Io came with much ado at last, with weary knuckles on thy brim, she kneeled sadly down, and stretching forth her fair long neck and crystal-horned crown, such kind of countenance as she had, she lifted to the sky, and there with sighing sobs and tears, and lowing dolefully, did seem to make her moan to Jove, desiring him to make some end of those her troubles storms endured for his sake. He took his wife about the neck, and sweetly kissing, prayed that Io's penance yet at length might by her grant be stayed. Thou shalt not need to fear, quoth he, that ever she shall grieve thee from this day forth, and in this case the better to believe me. The Stygian waters of my words, unpartial witness been. As soon as Juno was appeased, immediately was seen that Io took her native shape in which she first was born, and each became the self-same thing, the which she was beforn. For by and by she cast away her rough and hairy hide, instead whereof a soft, smooth skin with tender flesh did hide. Her horns sank down, her eyes and mouth were brought in lesser room, her hands, her shoulders, and her arms, in place again did come. Her cloven cleaves to fingers 5 again reduced were, on which the nails like polished gems did shine full bright and clear. In fine, no likeness of a cow, save whiteness did remain, so pure and perfect as no snow was able to its stain. She advanced herself upon her feet, which then was brought on too, and though she gladly would have spoke, yet durst she not so do, without good heed, for fear she should have lowed like a cow, and therefore softly with herself she gan to practice how distinctly to pronounce her words that intermitted were. Now as a goddess is she had in honour everywhere among the folk that dwell by Nile clad in linen weed. Of her in time came the Epiphus, begotten of the seed of mighty Jove. This noble imp now, jointly with his mother, through all the cities of that land, have temples tone with t'other. There was a match in heart and years, the lusty Phaeton, a stalwart stripling strong and stout, the golden Phoebus' son, whom making proud and stately vaunts of his so noble race, and unto him in that respect in nothing giving place, the son of Io could not bear, but said unto him thus, No marvel though thou be so proud and full of words, Euus, for every fond and trifling tale the which thy mother makes thy gildy wit and hair-brand head forthwith for gospel takes. Well, vaunt thyself of Phoebus still, for when the truth is seen thou shalt perceive that father's name a forged thing to been. At this reproach did Phaeton wax as red as any fire, howbeit for the present time did shame repress his ire. Unto his mother Climon straight he goeth, to detect the spiteful words that Epiphas against him did object. Yea, mother, quoth he, and which ought your greater grief to be, I, who at other times of talk was wont to be so free and stout, had ne'er a word to say I was ashamed to take so foul a foil, the more because I could not answer make. But if I be of heavenly race exacted as ye say, then show some token of that high and noble birth, I pray, and vouch me for to be of heaven. With that he gently cast his arms about his mother's neck, and clasping her full fast, brought her. Uh-oh. I'm about to lose my page. Oh no. Oh no. Why? Because I don't have a hard copy, guys. Somebody buy me a hard copy, okay? So I don't have to read from a phone. I was just on where what's his face wants to know that he is made divine. I'm still in the first book. Oh my goodness. Oh, here we go. Here's Io. Okay. And vouch me for to be of heaven. With that he gently cast his arms about his mother's neck, and clasping her full fast, besought her as she loved his life, and as she loved the life of Merops, and had kept herself his undefiled wife. And as she wished wealthily his sisters to bestow, she would some token give whereby his rightful sire to know. It is a doubtful matter, whither Climon moved more with his heir, Phaeton's earnest suit exacting it so sore, or with the slander of the brute lad to her charge before, did hold up both her hands to heaven, and looking on the sun, my right dear child, I safely swear, quoth she to Phaeton, that of this star, the which so bright doth glister in thine eye, of this same sun that cheers the world with light indifferent lie, wert thou begot. And if I feign, then with my heart I pray that never may I see him more until my dying day. But if thou have so great desire thy father for to know, thou shalt not need in that behalf much labor to bestow. The place from whence he doth arise adjoineth to our land, and if thou think thy heart will serve, then go and understand the truth of him. When Phaeton heard his mother say so, he gan to leap and skip for joy. He fed his fancy, though, upon the heaven and heavenly things, and so, with willing mind, from Ethiop first his native home, and afterward through Indy, set underneath the morning star he went so long, till as he found me where his father's house and daily rising was. The second book of Ovid's Metamorphoses. The princely palace of the sun stood gorgeous to behold, on stately pillars, builded high of yellow burnished gold, beset with sparkling carbuncles, that like to fire did shine. The roof was framed curiously of ivory pure and fine. The two door leaves of silver clear a radiant light did cast, but yet the cunning workmanship of things therein far past the stuff whereof the doors were made, for there a perfect plat had Vulcan drawn of all the world, both of the scourges that embrace the earth with winding waves, and of the steadfast ground, and of the heaven itself also, that both enclose it round. And first and foremost, in the sea, the gods thereof did stand loud, sounding Triton with his shrill and writhen trump in hand. Unstable Proteus, changing aye his figure and his hue from shape to shape, a thousand sides as lists to him to renew, Aegeon leaning boisterously on backs of mighty whales, and Doris with her daughters all, of which some cut the whales with splayed arms, some sate on rocks and dried their goodly hair, and some did ride upon the backs of fishes here and there. Not one in all points fully like an other could ye be, nor very far unlike, but such as sisters ought to be. The earth had towns, men, beasts, and woods, with sundry trees and rods, and running rivers with their nymphs and other country gods. Directly over all these same the plat of heaven was pight, upon the two door leaves, the signs of all the zodiac bright. Indifferently, 6 on the left and 6 on the right. When Climb's son had climbed up at length with weary pace, and set his foot within his doubted father's dwelling place, immediately he pressed forth to put himself in sight and stood aloof, for near at hand he could not bide the light. In purple robe and royal throne of emeralds fresh and green did Phoebus sit, and then on each hand stood waiting well beseen days, months, years, ages, seasons, times, and each the equal hours. There stood the springtime with a crown of fresh and fragrant flowers. There waited summer, naked, stark, all save a wheaten hat, and autumn, smeared with treading grapes late at the pressing fat, and lastly, quaking for the cold, stood winter, all forlorn, with rugged head as white as dove, and garments all to torn. For laden with the icicles that dangled up and down upon his gray and hoary beard and snowy frozen crown, the sun, thus sitting in the midst, did catch his piercing eye, with which full lightly when he list he all things did espy. Upon his child that stood aloof aghast, and trembling sore at sight of such unwonted things, and thus bespake him Thor, O noble imp, O Phaeton, which ought not such I see, of whom thy father should have cause shameful to be. Why hast thou travelled to my court? What is thy will with me? Then answered he, Of all the world, O only perfect light, O Father, Phoebus, if I may usurp that name of right, and that my mother, for to save herself from worldly shame, hide not her fault with false pretense and color of thy name. Some sign apparent grant, whereby I may be known thy son, and let me hang no more in doubt. He had no sooner done, but that his father, putting off the bright and fairy beams that glistered round his head like clear and golden streams, commanded him to draw him near, and him embracing said, To take me for thy rightful sire. Thou needest not be afraid. Thy mother Climb, of a truth from falsehood, standeth free, and for to put thee out of doubt, ask what thou wilt of me, and I will give thee thy desire. The lake whereby of old we gods do swear, the which mine eyes did never yet behold, bear witness with thee of my grant. He scarce this tale had told, but that the foolish Phaeton straight for a day did crave the guiding of his winged steeds and chariot for to have. Then did his father by and by forethink him of his oath, and shaking 20 times his head as one that was full wroth, bespake him thus, Thy words have made me rashly to consent to that which shortly both of us, I fear me, shall repent. Oh, that I might retract my grant, My son, I do protest. I would deny thee nothing else, save this thy fond request I may dissuade. There lies herein more peril than thou ween. The things of which thou doest desire of great importance being, more than thy weakness well can wield, a charge as well appears of great weight, than may agree with these thy tender years. Thy state is mortal, weak and frail. The thing that thou dost desire is such whereto no mortal man is able to aspire. Yet, foolish boy, thou dost desire, and all for want of wit, a greater charge than any god could ever have as yet. For were there any of them all so overseen and blind to take upon him this my charge, full quickly should he find that none but I could sit upon the fiery axle tree. No, not even he that rules this vast and endless space we see, not he that darts with dreadful hand the thunder from the sky, shall drive this chair. And yet, what thing in all the world, Purdy, is able to compare with Jove? Now first, the morning way lies steep upright, so that the steeds, in coolest of the day, and being fresh, have much ado to climb against the hill. Amidst the heaven the ghastly height augmenteth terror still. My heart doth wax as cold as wise full many a time, and oft for fear to see the sea and land from that same place aloft. The evening way doth fall plump down, requiring strength to guide that Tethys who doth harbour me within his sorges wide doth stand in fear, lest from the heaven I headlong down should slide. Besides all this, the heaven eye swims and wheels about full swift, and with his rolling drives the stars their proper course to shift. Yet do I keep my native course against this brunt so stout, not giving place as others do, but boldly bearing out the force and swiftness of that heaven that whirleth so about. Admit thou had my winged steeds and chariot in thy hands, what couldst thou do? Dost think thyself will be able to withstand the swiftness of the whirlpools? But that thou brunt and sway, yea, do the best and worst thou can, shall bear thee quite away. Perchance thou dost imagine there some towns of gods to find, with groves and temples richt with gifts, as is among mankind. Thou art deceived utterly. Thou shalt not find it so. By blind byways and ugly shapes of monsters must thou go, and although thou know'st the way so well as that thou could not stray between the dreadful bull's sharp horns, yet must thou make thy way against the cruel bow, the which the Aemonian archer draws against the ramping lion, armed with greedy teeth and paws, against the scorpion, stretching far his fell and veined claws, and each the crab that casteth forth his crooked cleaves awry. Not in such sort as t'other doth, and yet as dreadful I. Again, thou neither hast the power nor yet the skill, I know, my lusty coursers for to guide, that from their nostrils throw, and from their mouths the fiery breath that breedeth in their breast, for scarcely will they suffer me, who knows their nature best, when that their cruel courages begin to catch a heat, that hardly should I deal with them, but that I know the feat. But least my gift should to thy grief and utter peril tend. My son, beware, and while thou mayst, thy fond request amend, because thou would be known to be my child. Thou seemst to crave a certain sign, What surer sign, I pray thee, canst thou have, than this my fear so fatherly, the which I have of thee, which proveth me most certainly thy father for to be? Behold and mark my countenance. O would to God thy sight could pierce within my wilful breast, to see the heavy plight and heaps of care within my heart. Look through the world so round of all the wealth and goods therein, if aught there may be found in heaven or earth, or in the sea. Ask what thou likest best, and sure it shall not be denied. The only one request that thou hast made, I heartily beseech thee to relent, which for to teem the thing aright is even a punishment, and not an honour as thou thinkest. My Phaeton, thou dost crave instead of honour even a scourge and punishment for to have. Thou fondling thou, what dost thou mean with fawning arms around my neck thus flatteringly to hang? Thou needest not to doubt. I have already sworn by Styx. Ask what thou wilt of me, and thou shalt have. Yet let thy next wish somewhat wiser be. Thus ended his advertisement, and yet the wilful lad withstood his counsel, urging still the promise that he had, desiring for to have the chair, as if he had been mad. His father, having made delay as long as he could shift, did lead him where his chariot stood, which was of Vulcan's gift. The axle tree was massive gold, the buck was massy gold, the utmost fellies of the wheels, and where the tree was rolled, the spokes upon the collars, trace and hounces, and their hems did cast a sheer and glimmering light, as Phoebus shone thereon. Now, while the lusty Phaeton stood gazing hereupon, and wondered at the workmanship of everything, behold, the early morning in the east began me to unfold his purple gates, and showed her house bedecked with roses red. The twinkling stars withdrew, which by the morning star are led, who as captain of that host, that hath no peer nor match, doth leave his standing last of all within that heavenly watch. Now, when his father saw the world thus glister red and trim, and that his waning sister's horns began to wax and dim, he had the feather-footed Hours go harness in his horse, the goddesses with might and main themselves thereto enforce. His fire of foaming steeds full flood with juice of ambrosie, they take from the manger trimly dight, and to their heads do tie strong reined bits, and to the chariot do them well appoint. Then Phoebus did with heavenly salve his Phaeton's head anoint, that scorching fire could nothing hurt. Which done, upon his hair he put the fresh and golden rays himself was wont to wear. And then, as one whose heart misgave the sorrows drawing fast, with sorry sighs he thus bespake his wretchless son at last. And if thou canst, at least yet this thy father's law obey. Son, spare the whip, and rein them hard, lest they run so swift away, as that thou shalt have much ado their fleeing course to stay. Directly through the zones all five beware thou do not ride. A broad byway cut out askew that bendeth on the side, contained within the bonds of three the midmost zones do lie, which from the grisly northern bear and southern pole did fly. Keep on this way. My chariot rakes thou plainly shalt espy, and who thinketh that heaven and earth may well the heat endure, drive neither over high nor yet too low. For be thou sure, and if thou mount above thy bounds, the stars thou burnest clean. Again, beneath thou burn'st the earth, most safety is the mean, and least perchance thou overmuch the right hand way should take, and so misfortune should thee drive upon the writhen snake, or else by taking overmuch upon the left hand unto the altar thou be driven that doth against it stand indifferently. Between them both I wish thee for to ride. The rest I put to fortune's will, who be thy friendly guide. And better for thee that thyself, as in this case, provide, whiles that I prattle here with thee. Behold the dankish night, beyond all Spain, her utmost bound is passed out of sight. We may no longer chariots make. My wonted light is cold. The morning with her countenance clear the darkness hath appalled. Take rein in thy hand, or if thy mind thy counsel altered be, refuse to meddle with my wane, and while thou yet art free, and dost at ease within my house, in safeguard, well remain of this thine unadvised wish, not feeling yet the pain. Let me alone with giving still the world his wonted light, and thou thereof, as heretofore, enjoy the harmless sight. Thus much in vain, for feet in both young in years and wit, into the chariot lightly leapt, and vancing him in it was not a little proud that he the bridle gotten had. He thanks his father, whom it grieved to see his child so mad, while Phoebus and his wretchless son were entertaining this. Aeus, Ethon, Phlegon, and the fiery Pyrois, the restless horses of the sun, began to neigh so high with flaming breath that all the heaven might hear them perfectly. And with their hoofs they mainly beat upon the latitude great, the which when Tethys, knowing not of this her cousin's fate, had put aside, and given the steeds the free and open scope of all the compass of the sky within the heavenly cope, they girded forth, and cutting through the clouds that let their race with splayed wings, they overflew the eastern wind apace. The burden was so light, as the genets felt it not. The wonted weight was from the wain, the which they well did wot. For like as ships amidst the seas that scant of ballast have, do reel and totter with the wind, and yield to every wave, even so the wain, for want of weight it erst was wont to bear, did hoist aloft and scale and reel as though it empty were. Which, when the cartware did perceive, they left the beaten way, and taking bridle in the teeth began to run astray. The rider was sore aghast. He knew no use of rein, nor yet his way, and though he had, yet it had been in vain, because he wanted power to rule the horses and the wain. The first did sweat cold Charles his wain through force of Phoebus' rays, and in the sea forbidden him to dive in vain assays. The serpent at the frozen pole, both cold and slow by kind, though heat waxed wrath and stirred about a cooler place to find. And thou, Boots, though thou be slow of footmanship, yet wert thou fain, as fame reports, about thy wain to skip. Now, when unhappy Phaeton from top of all the sky beheld the earth that underneath the great way off did lie, he waxed pale for sodden fear. His joints and sinews quoke. The greatness of the glistering light his eyesight from him took. Now wished he that he had never had his father's horses see. It irked him that he thus had sought to learn his pedigree. It grieved him that he had prevailed in gaining his request to have been counted Merop's son. He thought it now the best. Thus thinking, was the headlong driven, as when a ship is borne by blustering winds, his sail-clothes rent, his stern in pieces torn, and tackling brusts, the which the pilot, trusting all to prayer, abandons wholly to the sea and fortune of the air. What should he do? Much of the heaven had passed behind, and more he saw before, both which he had measured in his mind, if looking forward to the west, which to approaches then might not betide, and to the east, if looking back again. He wist not what was best to do, his wits were ravished so. For neither could he hold the reins, nor yet durst let them go. And of his horse names was none that he remembered, though strange uncouth monsters did he see dispersed here and there, and dreadful shapes of ugly beasts that in the welkin were. There was a certain place in which the hideous scorpion throws his arms and compass far abroad, much like a couple of bows with writhen tail and clasping clays, whose poison limbs do stretch on every side, that of two signs they full the room do retch, whom when the lad beheld all moist with black and loathly sweat, with sharp and needle-pointed sting, as though he seemed to threat, he was so sore distraught for fear, he let the bridle slack, which, when the horses felt lie loose upon their sweating back, and rover straight throughout the air by ways unknown they ran, whereas they never came before since that world began. For look what way their lawless rage by chance and fortune drew, without controlment or restraint, that way they freely flew among the stars that fixed are within the firmament. They snatched the chariot here and there, one, while they coursing went upon the top of all the sky, anon again full round, they troll me down to lower ways and nearer to the ground, so that the moon was in amaze to see her brother's wain run under hers. The singed clouds began to smoke amain, each ground, the higher that it was, and nearer to the sky, the sooner was it set on fire, and made therewith so dry that everywhere it gan to chinkle. The meads and pastures green did sear away, and with the leaves the trees were burned clean, the parched corn did yield wherewith to work his own decay. Tush, these are trifles. Mighty towns did perish that same day, whose countries their folk were burnt, and forests full of wood were turned to ashes with the rocks and mountains where they stood. Then Athi, Sicilian Tori, and Timoli, and Oeta flamed high, and Ida, erst full of flowing springs, was then made utter dry. The burned virgins daily haunt the sacred Helicon, and Thracian Hemus, not yet as yet surnamed Egrion, did smoke both twain. And Etna, hote of nature, aye before increased by force of Phoebus' flame, now raged 10 times more. The forked Parnassus, Eryx, Synth, and Orthus, then did swelt, and all the snow of Rhodope did at that present melt. The like outraged Mount Dindymus and Mime and Macaulay felt. Cytheron born to sacred use with Osse and Pindus, high, and Olymp greater than them both did burn excessively. The passing cold that Scythia had defended, not the same, but that the barren Caucasus was partner of this flame. And so were each the air Alps and the Apennine beside, for all the clouds continually their snowy tops do hide. Then, wheresoever Phaeton did chance to cast his view, the world was all on flaming fire. The breath the which he drew came smoking from his scalding mouth as from a seething pot. His chariot also under him began to wax red hot. He could no longer dure the sparks and cinder flying out. Again the calm and smouldering smoke did wrap him round about. The pitchy darkness of the which so wholly had him bent, as that he wist not where he went, nor yet which way he went. The winged horses forcibly did draw him where they would. The Ethiopians at that time, as men for truth uphold, the blood by force of that same heat drawn to the outer part, and there adust from that time forth became so black and swart. The moisture was so dried up in Libby land that time that altogether dry and scorched continueth yet that clime. The nymphs with hair about their ears bewailed their springs and lakes. Boeotia for her Dirces loss great lamentation makes. For Amymone Argus wept, and Corinth for the spring, Pyrene, at whose sacred streams the Muses used to sing. The rivers further from the place were not in better case, but Tanais in his deepest stream did boil and stem apace. Old Panu and Cacus of the country Teuthrane and swift Ismenos in their banks by like misfortune fry. Then burn the Sophian Erymanth, and which we should burn again, the Trojan Xanthus and Lycormus with his yellow vein. Meander, playing in his banks, aye winding to and fro, Mygdonian Melas with his waves as black as any sloe. Eurotas, running by the foot of Tanare, boiled though. Then sod Euphrates, cutting through the midst of Babylon, then sod Orontes, and the Scythian swift Thermodon, then Ganges, Colchian Phasis, and the noble Istri, Alpheus and Sperchius, banks with flaming fire did glister. The gold that Tagus stream did bear did in the channel melt, and mid caster of this fire the raging heat was felt. Among the choirs of singing swans, that with their pleasant lay along the banks of Lydian brakes from place to place did stray. And Nile for fear did run away into the furthest clime of all the world, and hid his head, which to this present time is yet unfound. His mouths all seven clean void of water being, like seven great valleys, where, save dust, could nothing else be seen. By like misfortune, Hebrus dried, and Strymon both of Thrace. The western rivers Rhine and Rhone and Po were in like case. And Tiber, unto whom the goddess a faithful promise gave of all the world a monarchy and sovereign state to have. The ground did cranny everywhere, and light did pierce to hell, and made afraid the king and queen that in the realm do dwell. The sea did shrink, and whereas waves did late before remain, became a champion field of dust, and even a sandy plain. The hills, erst hid far under waves, like islands did appear, so that the scattered Cyclades for the time augmented were. The fishes drew them to the deeps. The dolphins durst not play above the water as before. The seals and porpoise lay with bellies upward on the waves, stark dead, and fame doth go that Nereus with his wife and daughters all were fain, as though to drive within the scalding waves. Thrice Neptune did advance his armies above the scalding sea, with sturdy countenance, and thrice for the hotness of the air was fain himself to hide. But yet the earth, the nurse of things, enclosed on every side between the waters of the sea and springs that now had hidden themselves within their mother's womb, for all the pain abidden, up to the neck put forth her head, and casting up her head between her forehead and the sun, as panting she did stand with dreadful quaking, all that was she fearfully did shake, and shrinking somewhat lower down, with sacred voice thus spake: O King of gods, and if this be thy will and my desert, why dost thou stay with deadly dint thy thunder down to dart? And if that needs I perish must go through force of fiery flame, let thy celestial fire, O God, I pray thee, do the same. A comfort it be to have thee author of my death. I scarce have power to speak the words. The smoke had stopped her breath. Behold my singed hair, behold my dim and bleared eye. See how about my scorched face the scalding embers fly. Is this the guerdon wherewithal ye quite my fruitfulness? Is this the honor that ye gave me for my plenteousness, and duty done with truest intent? For suffering of the plough to draw deep wounds upon my back, and rakes to rend me through? For that I over all the year continually am wrought, for giving fodder to the beasts and cattle all for naught, for yielding corn and other food wherewith to keep mankind, and that to honor you withal sweet frankincense I find? But put that in the case, that my desert destruction duly crave, what hath thy brother, what the seas deserved for to have? Why do the seas his allotted part thus ebb and fall so low, withdrawing from thy sky, to which it ought most near to grow? But if thou neither dost regard thy brother, neither me, at least have mercy on thy heaven. Look round about and see how both the poles begin to smoke, which if the fire appall do utter ruin, be thou sure the palace needs must fall. Behold, how Atlas 'gins to faint, his shoulders, though full strong, unnether able to uphold the sparkling extree long. If land and sea go to wreck, and heaven itself doth burn, to old confused chaos then of force me must return. Put to thy helping hand, therefore, to save the little left. If aught remain before, that all be quite and clean bereft. Thank you for letting me read to you tonight. Please check the description for where to buy my art and my channel page for where to send me a one-time donation. My full-length movie based on Oscar Wilde's Salome is coming. I'm still working on it. I will let you know when it's done. I'll see you tomorrow.